My name is Ryan Thompson, and for the first 8 years of my marriage, I believed my relationship with Claire was unbreakable. We met at a college mixer our junior year. I was studying computer engineering. She was majoring in communications. We bonded over shared laughter, long drives to the beach, and an obsessive love for vinyl records. After graduation, we moved into a modest craftsman house in the suburbs, adopted a golden retriever named Baxter, and launched our careers, me at a promising tech startup, Claire founding a boutique event planning agency. In those early days, our life felt like an endless honeymoon. Weekend road trips with Baxter riding shotgun, dinner dates at the sushi bar where we first bonded, lazy Sundays watching old movies in our living room. Claire's business flourished as she planned weddings and corporate galas. I poured myself into code, celebrating each promotion with a small bottle of scotch we shared on our porch. We dreamed of starting a family, of turning that guest bedroom into a nursery. Everyone called us the perfect couple, and we believed it. Then, 6 months ago, whispers began in the cracks. It started subtly. Claire's phone would buzz at odd hours, late at night or just before dawn. She'd silence it when I entered the room. When I asked who it was, she'd smile and say a new vendor or a friend checking in. I trusted her. A single lipstick mark on her blouse one morning threw me for a loop. Her explanation, I was helping a friend pick an outfit, felt hollow. It escalated when I found a hotel keycard in her purse labeled Room 502. My pulse hammered as I slipped it into my pocket. That same day, I noticed that her usual morning coffee, black with sugar, tasted faintly sweet, as if someone else had added flavored creamer. I hovered in the kitchen doorway, heart pounding, but she turned with a bright smile. Early meeting, sweetie. I grabbed a latte. I tried to ignore it, to believe Claire's reassurances. But then I came home one Friday at 5 p.m., early for a change, and walked into our bedroom, where Claire knelt before our dresser, pressing her lips against the cheek of a man whose business suit lay discarded on a chair. The air smelled strongly of his cologne. Neither of them had noticed me. Baxter's collar jingled on the hallway floor, startling them both. Claire's face drained of color as she dropped back onto the bed, hands pressed to her mouth. The man, a client she'd met planning a wedding, scrambled into his jacket, glanced at me with panic, and fled through the doorway, bumping the frame on his way out. Then the silence returned, except for Claire's sobs and my own ragged breathing. I did not yell. Instead, I walked into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection. The man I saw looked hollow, betrayed, stunned, furious beneath the surface calm. I went back to the bedroom, picked up Claire's phone, and slid it in my pocket. She collapsed into tears, but I steadied myself. Claire, I said softly, we need to talk. We sat on the edge of the bed. Her tears fell in glistening tracks. She confessed. It started as friendship. He listened when I felt lonely. I never meant to love him. My chest tightened at her words. I held her gaze. I need time, I said. Don't try to call or text me. I'm leaving. I grabbed a suitcase from the closet, clothes, my laptop, Baxter's leash, and left without looking back. I spent that night in a downtown hotel, lying awake listening to the hum of traffic. My phone buzzed with messages from Claire, apologies, pleas, confessions that she'd ended the affair. I deleted each without reading. In the morning, I checked out, leaving my wedding ring in a drawer, and returned home only to collect essentials, my guitar, family photos, my work files. Claire watched me from the porch with a mixture of shame and desperation. I said nothing, locked the door behind me, and drove away. Over the next fortnight, I immersed myself in work. I replaced Baxter's missing presence with pre-dawn runs along the waterfront and late nights debugging code. Friends reached out. You okay, man? I nodded and changed the subject. At home, I watched our empty rooms on the security feed. Chairs upturned, wedding invitations still stacked on the counter, Baxter's bed untouched. I fielded Claire's voicemails in which she begged for one more chance. I left each unheard. One morning I awoke to a handwritten letter slipped under my hotel room door. It read simply, Ryan, I was wrong. I miss you. Please forgive me. No signature, no flourish, just her name nearly erased. I crushed it in my fist, then dropped it in the trash. My heart ached both for the betrayal and for the love that once felt so strong. As the days passed, I realized the life I'd known no longer existed, and that ghosting Claire was my only way to reclaim my dignity. Silence was my revenge. Silence was my protection. Silence was the final proof that sometimes the absence of words speaks louder than any confession. By the end of the month, Claire's messages had ceased. Her social media posts became cryptic, quotes about forgiveness and self-reflection, I remained absent from her world. In mine, I began to heal. I shared my story anonymously on a Reddit thread, or slash off my chest, and the response was overwhelming. Strangers writing of their own betrayals, their own journeys through betrayal and healing. Reading their words, I felt less alone. But something shifted when a Sunday morning arrived with unexpected calm. The sun shone through my hotel window, and I realized I had to decide. Would I stay hidden behind silence forever, or would I seek closure? I packed my bags and drove back to the house we once shared. The post box was empty. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, into memories that smelled of lavender, of bacon cooking on lazy Sundays, of Baxter's soft wines. I walked through each room, touching a photo here, a book there, until I stood in the empty hallway where Claire and I once danced to our favorite song. I closed my eyes and exhaled, feeling the weight of the past lift slightly. Then I turned and walked away, leaving behind the ghosts of our love and carrying forward the promise of my own new beginning. Returning to our home felt like entering a museum of memories. The walls were bare of my belongings, but the items Claire had left, our wedding video paused on the TV, her piano standing in the corner with one dust-covered key, spoke volumes. Baxter's leash yanked at my hand as he sniffed every corner. His brown eyes searched mine for reassurance. I knelt to scratch behind his ears. "We're okay, buddy," I whispered. Over the next week, I settled my affairs. I closed our joint bank account, transferred utilities solely to my name, and made arrangements to store furniture I couldn't take immediately. Claire sent me an email, subject line, "Please," begging to meet and talk everything through. I didn't reply. Silence extended, a boundary as firm as locked doors. Work consumed my days. I spearheaded a new product rollout, presenting to executives with a calm intensity one hadn't known I possessed. My colleagues remarked on my focus, unaware of the storm that had passed. In the evenings, I led a programming study group at my alma mater, mentoring students struggling with algorithms. Teaching them felt meaningful, an antidote to my own sense of powerlessness. Meanwhile, Claire became a ghost in my peripheral life. I saw news stories of her planning a high-profile charity gala, an event she'd once dreamed would cement her reputation. I wondered if she scheduled vendor calls from that same hotel suite, whether she ever thought of me during her keynote address. Her absence loomed large in every corner I returned to. After 2 weeks, I found myself craving closure. I drafted a second email, more measured than the first, detailing how her actions had broken my trust, how her laughter now haunted me, and how I needed a definitive end before I could move on. I offered an in-person meeting in a neutral location, the park where we'd first kissed. I pressed send, hands trembling. Claire responded within hours. Her message was raw. "I'll meet you. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., Elmwood Park." I felt a flicker of dread. This was bounded territory, our last encounter a jury of two. The next evening, I parked beside the old oak tree beneath the swing set where we had once shared secret plans for our future. Claire arrived, walking toward me slowly, face pale beneath the lamplight. "Ryan," she said softly, "thank you for coming." She offered no hugs, just an extended hand. I shook it and took a seat on the nearby bench. Baxter sat beside me, watching Claire with wary eyes. "I'm sorry," Claire began, voice trembling. I can't undo what I did, but I need you to understand why I made that mistake." She spoke of loneliness, of feeling overshadowed by my long hours at the office, of being caught up in her own success and seeking validation elsewhere. She didn't beg. She simply told the truth. I listened. Each word unburdened her, but weighed heavily on me. When she finished, the silence lengthened until a cricket's chirp broke it. I finally said, "Thank you for telling me." My voice was steady despite the ache. "But I can't be with someone who chose to betray me." Claire nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. "I understand." She took a shaky breath. "I hope, someday, you'll forgive me." I stood, running a hand through my hair. "I still love you," I admitted quietly, but it wasn't enough anymore. "But I'm ghosting you. Not out of cruelty, but to heal. Goodbye, Claire." She mouthed, "Goodbye, Ryan," and turned away. I watched her go until she disappeared down the path. Baxter nudged my hand. I petted him, feeling both sorrow and relief. Over the next month, I maintained our ghosting pact. I blocked Claire on every platform, left her letters unopened in my mailbox, and erased our shared playlist from my phone. The silence was harsh, but necessary. I volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends, walking dogs and sorting donations. The work was cathartic. Each wagging tail reminded me that loyalty could be simple, unconditional. One Tuesday, I returned from the shelter to find a single pink envelope on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid. Claire and Baxter, both looking happier than I'd seen in months, at a dog park. On the back she'd written, "Thank you for giving me space to find myself, and to remember what truly matters." My chest clenched. I held the photo for a long moment, then placed it in the recycling bin. I realized then that ghosting Claire wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and allowing her to find her own path, away from the safety net of our marriage. In the end, silence had given us both a chance to rediscover who we were, apart. Months passed, and with each sunrise I felt a little more like myself. I moved Baxter and my few belongings into a modest one-bedroom apartment closer to the office, fewer reminders of Claire's absence, more space to rebuild my life. The transition was both liberating and unsettling. The echo of my footsteps in an empty hallway reminded me of all I had lost, yet the quiet also gave me room to think, to heal, and to rediscover parts of myself I'd neglected. Mornings began with Baxter's eager nuzzle. I brewed my coffee, stretched on the small balcony overlooking maple trees, and watched the city come to life. On weekdays I commuted to work, my thoughts still drifting to the life Claire and I had shared, our wedding photos on the mantle, our favorite songs on vinyl, the sound of her laughter echoing down the hallway. But those memories no longer felt like prison walls. They were reminders of why I needed to move forward. At the office, I channeled my energies into a major product launch. I led brainstorming sessions that crackled with creative energy, mentored junior engineers who reminded me of my own eager college days, and finally closed a deal that secured the company's next phase of growth. My colleagues noticed the change, what they called laser focus. In truth, I was learning to turn pain into purpose, coding solutions on screens instead of replaying Claire's betrayal in my mind. Evenings were time for Baxter and me. We explored new walking routes in the neighborhood, discovered a dog-friendly cafe where I sipped black tea while Baxter gnawed happily on a peanut butter biscuit, and occasionally joined a local dog walking group. At an outdoor training class, I met other single pet owners, Kelly, who had lost her husband to illness, Marcus, who'd recently divorced. Their stories of loss and resilience echoed my own, and in those shared smiles and sympathetic nods, I found community and understanding. On weekends, I reclaimed old hobbies. In our garage, I set up a workbench to build model airplanes again, the scent of balsa wood and glue filling the air. Carefully cutting, sanding, and assembling each tiny fuselage became a meditative practice, each precise joint a small victory over chaos. I also dusted off my guitar, playing familiar chords that once underscored happy memories. At first my fingers stumbled, the music fractured, but over time the melodies returned, more nuanced with the tinge of heartache and hope. Despite these positive changes, there were nights when loneliness crept in. I would sit in my chair after Baxter slept, cradling a pint of ice cream and scrolling through old photos. Claire and me grinning on our honeymoon, Baxter prancing through a park in autumn leaves, the two of us baking Christmas cookies. Tears came unbidden. I let them flow, knowing that grief was part of healing. I wrote in a journal every night, my thoughts, my fears, my small triumphs. Each page tracked my journey from anger to acceptance. One day, I stumbled upon my own Reddit post in r/relationships. I ghosted my wife after her affair. I don't know if I can forgive her. Comments ranged from condemnation to compassion. Strangers shared their own pain, successes and reconciliation, or cautious advice on moving on. Reading their words gave me perspective. Betrayal is universal, but so is the capacity to heal. I thanked them silently and closed the app, carrying their collective empathy into my own story. As winter approached, I felt ready to give back. I volunteered at a local community center, teaching a beginner's coding class for middle schoolers. Their wide-eyed enthusiasm reminded me why I had become an engineer in the first place. Seeing them light up when their programs ran correctly was pure joy, an antidote to the months of sorrow. I also joined a hiking group on Sundays, tackling trails that challenged my body and cleared my mind. Misty forests, frozen streams, panoramic views of snow-capped peaks. 2 months before the 6-month mark of my self-imposed exile, I received an official court notice, a review of Claire's petition for increased visitation. I forwarded it unopened to my attorney, who assured me that unless Claire completed the court-mandated parenting program and therapy appointments, there would be no change. I felt a flicker of compassion. Claire had done the work to regain her role as a mother, but I still prioritized Baxter and my own well-being. That same week, a letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten, in Claire's familiar script. Ryan, I have finished every parenting module. I am halfway through therapy. I've chosen our daughter over my mistakes. Please consider meeting me. if only to acknowledge the next step. Claire. I held the letter for a long moment, feeling both the weight of her admissions and the distance between us. Then I placed it in a drawer with the unopened court notice. I wasn't ready to meet, but knowing she was working gave me hope. Hope for Lily, hope for closure, and perhaps someday hope for forgiveness. On Christmas Eve, the snowfall was gentle, coating the streets in silent white. I accompanied Baxter on a final walk before bed, the world hushed except for crunching snow. I stood beneath a street lamp, its golden glow illuminating my breath. I realized that ghosting Claire had been my way of reclaiming myself, but it had also cut me off from the future I once imagined. In that quiet moment, I made a decision. The next holiday season, I would choose my own path without regret, whether that included Claire or not. That night, I returned home, lit a scented candle, and sat by the window with Baxter at my feet. The snow fell softly, each flake a promise of renewal. In the flickering candlelight, I saw the reflection of a man who had endured heartbreak, stepped away, and found strength in solitude. And though the journey was far from over, I felt ready for the chapters yet to come, written not in silence, but in the shared laughter of new beginnings. 6 months after I first ghosted Claire, a brisk spring breeze carried the scent of cherry blossoms through my open office window. I sat at my desk reviewing code, but my mind wandered to the parallel narrative of Claire's progress. Completed therapy sessions, certification from the parenting program, and positive supervised visits with our daughter. A court date loomed on the calendar, the hearing to decide whether Claire could transition to semi-supervised visits. I sipped my tea, a mixture of calm and anticipation settling in my chest. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in a navy suit and white shirt, an armor of professionalism. Baxter rode shotgun as we drove downtown. I reached over to scratch his ears. He gazed up at me with gentle understanding. I opened the courthouse doors, the hush of marble walls greeting us. Claire waited in the hallway, her posture nervous but determined. She spotted me, gave a small, tentative nod, and then turned to meet her lawyer's clarifying questions. In the courtroom, I took the witness stand to review my affidavit. Documentation of Claire's initial betrayal, the evidence of her continuing workplace misconduct, and my own demonstrated commitment to our daughter's stability. I kept my testimony factual and devoid of bitterness, focusing on Lily's welfare rather than matrimonial blame. Claire's lawyer presented her progress, therapy certificates, parenting program completion, and therapist evaluations praising her emotional growth. The judge listened intently, asking thoughtful questions. When the judge rendered the decision, granting Claire semi-supervised weekend visits at my home under the presence of a court-approved supervisor, I exhaled. It was not full reunification, but it was the next step toward healing. Claire's shoulders drooped in relief. I nodded, shaking her hand in a gesture of cautious cooperation. Lily, sitting between us, beamed when told she could have her mother over for Saturday brunch. I smiled at her, my heart warming at her resilience. The first semi-supervised visit arrived on a Saturday morning. I cleaned the apartment thoroughly, dusted shelves of my model airplanes, and laid out snacks, fresh fruit, cheese cubes, and Lily's favorite cinnamon rolls. The supervisor, a kindly social worker named Mrs. Delgado, arrived punctually. Claire walked in carrying a bouquet of daisies, our wedding flower, and Lily ran to meet her, arms outstretched. For 2 hours, they played board games, read picture books, and baked brownies together under Mrs. Delgado's gentle oversight. Watching through the living room window as they laughed over spilled batter, I felt a complex mixture of grief and gratitude. Grief for the betrayal that brought us here, gratitude that Claire had committed to change. At one point, Claire glanced my way and mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded, offering a small, genuine smile. Baxter purred at my feet, sensing the easing of tension. As weeks passed, these semi-supervised visits grew more natural. Claire mastered the morning routine. She woke Lily gently, helped her get dressed, and served the cinnamon rolls. Mrs. Delgado's presence receded into the background as trust blossomed. I felt comfortable stepping out to run errands, knowing Lily was safe with her mother. One afternoon, I returned to find Claire and Lily painting a mural of daisies on a canvas. Lily looked up and exclaimed, "Look, Daddy, we painted our flower." My chest tightened at the shared joy. In my own life, I continued to grow. Baxter and I explored new trails, and I found a hiking partner in Kelly from the Dog Cafe. Our walks filled with easy conversation and mutual understanding of navigating life's losses. I began to date casually, opening myself to the possibility of love again. though never forgetting the lessons learned from Claire's affair. My journal entries shifted from sorrow to curiosity. What might the future hold? How could I bring compassion into new relationships without losing myself? The emotional highlight came on Father's Day. Claire arrived with Lily for an unscheduled Sunday brunch. Mrs. Delgado had agreed to stay home that day, trusting the progress we'd made. In the kitchen, Claire prepared scrambled eggs and pancakes while Lily set the table. I poured orange juice and offered a toast to new beginnings and continued healing. Claire reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Lily giggled and said, "I love my mommy and my daddy." The simple truth of her words brought tears to my eyes, tears of relief and hope. 2 months later, our 6-month review hearing approached. This time, the courtroom felt less daunting. Claire and I sat side by side at the plaintiff's table, no lawyers flanking us, just Lily at my side drawing on a sketchpad. The judge reviewed Mrs. Delgado's reports, Claire's consistent attendance, absence of any lapses, and Lily's blossoming confidence. He commended our collaborative parenting and granted Claire unsupervised weekend visitation. Every weekend, alternating weeks, with the understanding that she would continue therapy check-ins. As we left the courtroom, Claire turned to me with a radiant smile. "Thank you," she said softly, "for trusting me again." I took her hand. It felt like the first time I truly understood the art of forgiveness. "Thank you for showing me you could change," I replied. Lily ran between us, arms outstretched, and we embraced as a family. Not as the couple we once were, but as co-parents committed to healing the wounds of the past. Back at home that evening, we hosted our first fully unsupervised Sunday dinner. The table was laden with pasta salad, roasted vegetables, and a cake decorated with fondant daisies. Baxter lounged under the table, wagging his tail. We laughed over Lily's stories from school and toasted the journey we'd shared, from betrayal and ghosting to accountability and restoration. The daisies in the center caught the glow of the candles, symbolizing both remembrance and renewal. Later, as Lily tucked into bed, Claire and I sat on the balcony. The night sky stretched wide above us. The cool breeze carried the scent of jasmine from our neighbor's garden. We spoke quietly about the past, the ache of betrayal, the silence of ghosting, and the slow, deliberate steps toward reconciliation. We acknowledged that trust had been broken but could be rebuilt, brick by truth and mortar by consistency. In that shared silence, I realized ghosting Claire had been necessary to protect my heart and to hold space for change. But coming back together had been an act of courage for both of us, a willingness to confront pain, to admit wrongdoing, and to choose love over resentment. Our story was no longer defined by that first betrayal, but by the resilience that followed. As the stars wheeled overhead, I slipped my arm around Claire's shoulders. She leaned into me, and Baxter padded out to join us, resting his head on our knees. For a moment, we were simply a family under the night sky, flawed, tested, but unbroken. And in that moment, I felt certain that true love, though wounded, could not only survive betrayal but emerge stronger on the other side.